The inflation trap that crushed Germany, and how the US repeats it. In the early 1920s, in the heart of Europe, the German mark became a joke, a chilling, cruel joke. People carried their life savings in wheelbarrows just to buy a single loaf of bread. A simple postage stamp cost billions of marks. Children on the streets played with wads of cash like building blocks, stacking bundles of worthless currency up to their knees. This is the image that history gives you. A nation spiraling into economic madness. An unfortunate, tragic accident. This is the lie, the profound, deliberate lie they want you to believe. The truth is, the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic was not a mistake. It was a trap, an intricate, brutal, and incredibly effective financial weapon deployed by a government to destroy the wealth of its own people in order to solve a debt problem. It was a mass confiscation event disguised as an economic collapse. And what is most terrifying is that this historical event is not a distant memory. It is a blueprint, a deadly, quiet blueprint that is being followed right now in the very country you live in. The inflation trap is being set once more, and this time you are the prey. And saddled with a debt so immense it was designed to be unpayable. The victors, France, Britain, and the United States, demanded reparations to the tune of 132 billion gold marks. This was not just a debt, it was a death sentence. It was a punishment designed to prevent Germany from ever rising as a global power again. Think of it this way. Germany was forced to take on a debt that was more than 3 times its entire national GDP at the time. It was the largest single debt ever imposed on a nation. The problem was, you can't pay a debt like that with labor, you can't pay it with industry, and you certainly can't pay it with a currency that has no gold backing. The German government, the fledgling Weimar Republic, was caught in an impossible situation. They were a brand new democracy facing a crippling debt, and their people were starving. The reparations had to be paid in foreign currency, in dollars, in francs, in pounds sterling. But the only currency the German government could print was the mark. They could not print dollars, they could not print gold. They could only print their own paper money. So, what did they do? The government found a solution that was, on the surface, brilliantly simple. They decided to print the money they needed to buy the foreign currency they needed. This was the first and most fatal step into the inflation trap. But as more and more marks flooded the market, the value of the mark began to plummet, slowly at first, and then with terrifying speed. In 1921, you could buy a loaf of bread for 4 marks. By 1923, that same loaf of bread cost over 400 billion marks. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate, strategic, and horrifying act of financial war against their own population. The government wasn't just printing money, it was executing a mass confiscation of wealth. Think about the citizens, the middle-class German who had worked his entire life to save 50,000 marks for retirement. He stored that money safely in a bank or in government bonds, thinking it was a secure foundation for his future. But with every passing day, with every new bundle of cash that rolled off the presses at the Reichsbank, the value of his savings was being vaporized. His life's work, his family's security, was being systematically stolen. That 50,000 marks that once bought a house was soon not enough to buy a single loaf of bread. The government's debt, a crushing burden, was being liquidated to nothing. The citizens' savings, the foundation of the private economy, were being liquidated as well. This is the core of the inflation trap. It is a silent tax. It is a tax that is never voted on, never discussed, and never seen on a bill. It simply erases the value of your stored wealth. The German government used this hidden, powerful tool to effectively default on its internal debt without ever formally declaring bankruptcy. The savings accounts, the war bonds, the fixed pensions, all of it became worthless. The government's debts, denominated in its own worthless currency, were erased. It was a financial guillotine that fell on the neck of the German middle class. The trap worked exactly as intended. It solved the government's debt problem by transferring the entire burden onto the unsuspecting population. A loan of 1,000 marks could be paid back with 1,000 marks that were now worth less than a few cents. Second, the exporters. As the German mark plummeted in value, German goods became incredibly cheap on the international market. German companies that exported to the US, Britain or France made astronomical profits, selling their goods for valuable foreign currencies and paying their workers in worthless paper marks. They got rich while their employees starved. And finally, the ultimate winners were the financial elite, the industrialists, the bankers, and the speculators. These individuals did not store their wealth in marks. They held their assets in gold, in land, in factories, in art. As the currency collapsed, they were able to buy up the real, tangible assets of the German nation, the very assets the middle class had to sell just to eat, for next to nothing. They acquired real estate, entire factories, and priceless works of art for the cost of a dinner. This was the greatest wealth transfer in modern history, from the bottom and the middle to the very top. The inflation trap was a masterclass in how a government, aided by a complicit central bank, can engineer a mass transfer of wealth without a single person firing a gun. The inflation didn't happen to the government, it was done by the government. Now let's fast forward to today. You are told that the United States is the wealthiest, most powerful nation in the history of the world. The Federal Reserve, the US central bank, is the modern-day Reichsbank. Since the 2008 financial crisis, and especially since 2020, the Fed has engaged in an unprecedented policy of quantitative easing, QE. This is a fancy term for printing money. The Fed created trillions of dollars out of thin air and used that money to buy government bonds and other financial assets. They did this not to fund social programs or build infrastructure. They did it to liquefy the financial system and, in effect, to monetize the government's debt. Just as the Reichsbank printed marks to buy foreign currency to pay reparations, the Federal Reserve is creating new dollars to buy government bonds and keep the debt machine from collapsing. The mechanism is identical. The only difference is the scale. Your purchasing power, your savings, and the value of your salary are being silently eroded every single day. The value of your dollar is being quietly but brutally taken from you. This is the modern-day inflation trap. The government's debt is being slowly, painlessly, and systematically liquidated at your expense. Just like in Weimar, those who have their wealth stored in cash or fixed income assets like bonds are losing. The middle class, the people who saved and planned for retirement, are the greatest victims. Their life savings are being turned into an invisible ghost. The value is being transferred. But who is it being transferred to? The same winners as in Weimar. First, the debtors. The US government itself is the biggest debtor, and it is using inflation to make its trillions in debt less valuable in real terms. They are getting richer while you are getting poorer. They understand that inflation is not a bug of the system. It is the most powerful feature. It is a tool for transferring power and wealth from the many to the few. It is the same trick, the same trap, just on a global scale. The hyperinflation of Weimar was not an exception. It was the most brutal, unvarnished example of a universal rule. A government with an unpayable debt will use its central bank to print money and solve the problem by destroying the wealth of its citizens. The only question is how quickly they choose to do it. Weimar was an open, fast-acting surgery. The current inflation is a slow, quiet, chronic disease. But the outcome is the same. The German people, with no understanding of the financial mechanism, could not fight back. Their wealth was simply taken. And today, the American people, told that the inflation is transitory or a result of supply chains, are just as defenseless. The history of money is the history of power. Don't let them tell you that these events are disconnected or accidental. Follow the money, follow the debt, follow the inflation. It will lead you to the same place every single time. It will lead you to the truth about how the system works. The inflation trap is real, and it is being sprung. The only way to protect yourself is to understand. Do not be the oblivious citizen who watched their savings vanish. You must understand the dark history of money to protect your own wealth. Subscribe and turn on notifications now to join the community that tracks the true power dynamics of the world. We are dedicated to exposing the financial traps they set for you. We have covered the debt that sank Napoleon, the gold that killed the Romanovs, and the inflation that crushed Germany. Next, we expose the most guarded secret of all, the origin of the financial machine itself. Click on the next video now as we reveal the dark money history behind the creation of the Federal Reserve. Don't let their financial tricks blind you. Demand the truth.